Hello and welcome to this video on IGCSE Marine Science. Today we're looking at section 6.2, which is tourism, especially tourism in marine environment. As always, these videos are made for my class, but anyone is welcome to use them, and any mistakes here are mine and mine alone, and it does no way reflect on Cambridge. But let's get rolling. So this is the part of a syllabus where we move away from like standard biology and chemistry and more into the socioeconomic factors. And when we look at tourism, it is a big deal. Many areas where there are protected marine areas like the Philippines, Thailand, Galapagos, so on. Tourism is a very big part of the income of people living there. So of course it's going to matter. If you're going to have a lot of well-paying tourists, it's going to give money and income to the local people, which they, of course, will see as a benefit. It also means there will be jobs, employment, and if you want to see how much that matters, you can look at some of the parts who were very badly affected when, due to COVID, very few people traveled. If you have a economics that's dependent on tourism, you'll be hit quite hard there. When there is tourism in an area, there tend to be an investment in infrastructure. It can be anything from roads to trains, ferries, airports, and so on, which will also benefit the local people, but can also, to some degree, damage the local environment. You'll also see like there's more other facilities coming in. Could be medical facilities, which can also be used by the local population. So from this point of view, tourism seems like a win-win, but it will also lead to an increased load on stuff like sewage treatment, on the ability to get rid of waste, how to sort garbage. You'll also need more power, you will need more fresh water, and those demands can be hard to meet and can in some cases, quite often actually, lead to degradation of the environment that you want the tourists to see. So there's a big conflict here between short-term gains and long-term losses if you look at both the economic and the factors for the environment. The book mentions a lot about ecotourism, which is seen as a type of sustainable tourism where people don't destroy the environment and where they develop understanding of environmental issues, where they develop understanding of local cultures, and there is a focus on conservation. When this works, this is quite good, but I'm going to question if ecotourism always works. Some cases of ecotourism can seem like ecotourism, but in one way or another, you can end up harming the environment anyway, sometimes just by the number of people going there, the number of ships sailing there, and other impacts on nature. So while ecotourism on paper sounds like a brilliant idea, there are quite a few cases, as we'll look into later, where they might end up again damaging the very same environment you want to show off. So when we look at tourism in marine areas, there will always be positive and negative effects. We already talked about the positive effects, economics, employment, education, some of them, but also the fact that maybe the local communities or the government will go in and make protected areas, and there might be funding for conservation science. All of that will be good both for the scientific exploration of the area, but can also help with jobs, with creating more awareness. The negative side can also quite often be seen when you go out traveling, because I think we've all seen those pictures of a very beautiful beach, and then you see the plastic, or you see pollution, or you see way too many cruise ships. So when we do tourism, there will be competition for land and resources, and some of the things that nature often lacks today is space and land. So if we cut down mangrove forests to build hotels, there will be less room for the mangroves. It will also lead to increased demand for food, water, and power. And if you are in a very remote place, that might lead to overfishing, of overexploitation of resources to help give food to the tourists. Existing businesses can be affected. Um, they can both be good and bad. For example, on Iceland, there is a clear competition between the people who want to do whale watching and the ships who want to do whale hunting. Also, indirectly, there can be a lot of pollution. There can be anything from cruise ships dumping their tanks. It can be accident with boats. It can be noise pollution from boats, which can be a huge problem for stuff like dolphins or manatees. It can just be waste, plastic, whatever, especially if you don't have an infrastructure in the location to help solve this when there's tourism. More sadly, you can see damage to sensitive ecosystem. People maybe not behaving correctly around the coral reef. Maybe they're diving around the coral reef with sunscreen that is not coral friendly. Maybe you pick up a little piece of coral. Maybe even worse, you remove organisms for trade. We sadly see that where people try to sell turtles and other things online and bring them home with them. There's also interaction with sensitive species. This can be anything from too many ships around a whale watching ground to people behaving weirdly around sea otters and other animals. So the animals will change their behavior, which can also lead to animals becoming too familiar with to humans, which we don't want. So for all kind of tourism, there will be positive and negative uh, sides. Many of the positive things will be towards economic growth. Many of the negative parts will be towards the entire nature and the nature we want to show off. And in worst cases, this can lead to degradation. So you end up with an ecosystem that's not the same anymore. And then, in worst case scenarios, people stop going. And then you lost both your income and your ecosystem, and you are way worse off than you used to be. So here are a couple of examples. On one hand, we have the kind of eco-friendly holiday we all dream about, maybe going on, well, if you do marine science, you might dream about going diving on a coral reef or snorkeling in a lagoon. And then we have the kind of tourism we often end up with, mass tourism, where the entire beach is covered by people. I'm not saying one of them is right or one of them is wrong, just the fact that tourism doesn't always go the way we want it to. So, if you end up working with marine science, it's important you know how to reduce the impact of tourism. Because on one hand, yes, you do want people putting money in your pocket, you want education, you want better infrastructure. But on the other hand, you also want to keep having this wonderful ecosystem. You want to support the species who live there. So now we're going to look at the way you can reduce impact on tourism, of tourism, sorry. So the book here look at some different ways we can do impact reduction, and for all of them, there are both benefits and problems. Education is a pretty good one. This is me trying to teach you over a computer screen, so of course I like education. Education will raise awarenesses, and in general, the more you know about nature, the more you want to protect it. If you know the names of the species that mean more to you. This also helps reduce damage to the environment due to better knowledge. If you know how the species live, it's easier to protect them. If you know how the ecosystem function, it is easier to protect it. Lack of knowledge can lead to a lot of damage without you wanting to. On the other hand, as I know as a teacher, all kind of education relies on people cooperating, and it can often be so, but sometimes people are people, and it might not go the way you want to. Legislation, laws, is a good thing when put in place and enforced. If you give people fines, if people can go in jail for destroying the environment, that has an effect. It is also expensive to monitor. It requires people who know how to monitor these rules, know how to enforce them, and sometimes having rules can kind of, for some weird reason, make people want to break them. Long-term planning is smart. If you plan not for just a few years, but many years ahead, how you want to do your tourism, you can have better design, less damage. It can also lead to solutions that might require more financial support to get rolling. Renewable resources such as sun, solar, wind, and so on, we like them. They um, have a much less CO2 impact, they have much less pollution, but they can also be expensive and they can be less stable. Uh, the sun might not shine, the wind might not blow, and then you're left without a reliable power source. Banning of single-use plastic, that's a pretty good idea, and I think, as we'll talk about later, plastic pollution is a big thing. So less plastic in the ocean will be a huge benefit. It does require the ability to store and recycle plastic then. And then limiting motor transport around reefs, for example, around the mangrove, will lead to less pollution, less CO2, but it will also make it harder to transport goods and people. So for all things, there'll always be a drawback, and you have to take that into consideration when you do your planning. In the book, there is an example of ecotourism, the Bosca del Cabo in Costa Rica. Um, I'm not going to go into super much detail here, but they mention some of the things they try to do. This company, they supply local conservation projects. They give money to local turtle conservation. They try to use building materials that are local and renewable. They use biodegradable soap. They do recycling. They get their energy from solar systems. They have low impact transport, and they have engagement with local community, and they do education of the guests. So in this way, this ticks off a lot of the boxes that we um, think they should be there for call something sustainable ecotourism. Now let's look at some examples from what in biology is pretty much the holy grail, the Galapagos Islands. The Galapagos Islands are quite remote, um, but if you are in any way interested in biology, evolution, so on, it's a place that many people like to go visit. I know I would. It's also a place where tourism has an impact. So let's go into a little bit more detail about the Galapagos Islands. As ecosystems go, the Galapagos Islands are pretty unique, mainly because they are so far away from the mainland, and you have these islands have a different age, um, and they have been isolated. Also, they're quite remarkable because it was here that Charles Darwin, by looking at the finches, he came up with some of the inspiration that later led to his book Origin of the Species, which is the cornerstone for modern biology. It's a national park, it's a World Heritage Site, and it's a biosphere reserve, so it's a pretty big deal. So, the Galapagos Islands, they are pretty unique, and only 4 of them are inhabited by humans. In 1959, the Galapagos Islands was classed as a national park, and tourism then started developing on the inhabited islands. And there has been more and more tourism in the years, and it has an impact on the Galapagos Islands. One issue is invasive species. When boat transport, they transport goods and people to the islands. Sometimes by accident, we carry organisms we don't want. Rats, dogs, cats, ants, sheep, and goat. They all sound like nice animals, but if you introduce them into an environment where not used to cats, for example, they are a huge threat to local bird life. Rats can pretty much breed super fast and be a threat to pretty much anything, especially if there are no native predators. Um, so also introduced species of plants can outgrow the local species and end up changing the environment. Legal fishing is also an issue around Galapagos, especially sharks and sea cucumbers have been highly affected. The El Nino, global warming, has an effect on the coral reefs around Galapagos, and pollution, especially from increased hotel and resort development and ships arriving, has polluted the clean water around Galapagos. So all the people who want to come and see the unique nature of Galapagos in one way or another can help damage the thing they want to see. Tourism is a major source of income for the Galapagos Islands, and most visitors that come to see wildlife and to learn about the islands. People come for bird watching, diving, and so on. So the Galapagos Islands have come up with some solutions, which we'll look at the next slide. Solutions that people have come up with on the Galapagos Islands are restriction on development and travel. Only 4 of the islands are developed and inhabited by humans. Resort development are only allowed in certain areas, and some islands can only be visited by scientific research teams. There is restriction on number of visitors. On some islands, only a set number of people may visit, and if there is damage to the ecosystem, the number of visitors are reduced. There is increased management of boat routes and boat licensing. Tour routes for cruise ships and local boats are set by the national park. That prevents too many boats arriving at the island at one time. Tour operators and fishing boats, they need a license. There are entrance fees for the national parks, and these money are used to fund conservation projects. And there is a focus on education. The Charles Darwin Research Center and the Galapagos Island National Park Center both educate visitors about the natural history and how to take care of the unique nature. So is ecotourism or sustainable tourism the future? We're now exiting the syllabus, and any ideas here, mine and mine alone, of course. In one way, I would love ecotourism to work. I love the idea that you go somewhere, you learn about nature, you learn how to take care of it, you visit nature in a sustainable way, you leave only footprints, take only memories and pictures. I love that idea. And I've tried that myself many times. I also know that it's very hard not to have an impact. And as more and more people we want to travel, we want to go some places, and we're always looking for the next unique place, we can tend to overexploit the things we like and thereby end up destroying them. And I think it's super sad when people like me who travel to look for nature, if we end up damaging the one thing we love. So is ecotourism the future? Maybe. But I also think that it's important to have parts of nature that are actually cut off from tourists, that we don't visit, places that are only there for nature's own sake, national parks, where the focus is not on tourism, but on nature. Anyway, thanks for staying along on the video for so long, and hope you enjoyed it. Bye.